Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
What is up, my future fantasy football champions? Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to see more fantasy football content. But first, I am your host, Ryan Basulto, and we got a lot to talk about today. We are going to talk about what constitutes a good fantasy defense and how can we pick a good fantasy defense and what we should look forward to going into the next season, into our future drafts. Because remember, we are here to draft to become champions. We are not here to become second place, first place loser. We are here to be champions. So we are going to talk about that. We are going to talk about some free agency. Let's also not forget that T.Y Hilton got signed to a $10 million deal. I want to talk about that, and I just don't get him. And many, many more. But first, let's talk about what constitutes picking up a good fantasy football defense. And it's hard to really identify it because fantasy defenses are, yes, based a lot off of defenses in the previous years, but that's not always the case. There are times when the Denver Broncos had a top-ranked defense. They came back, didn't look as strong. The Ravens had one of the top defenses last year. Yes, they were a top 4 fantasy defense, but they weren't the top one. The Steelers were, who were projected. But fantasy defense comes down to its bare bones scoring. So each sack that a defense gets is 1 point. Each interception a defense gets 2 points. Fumble recovery is also 2 points. If they get a safety, that is also 2 points. If they score a defensive touchdown, that is 6 points. Kick return touchdown, that's also 6 points. That's why you also want to make sure that you pick a defense with a good special teams. And 2-point conversions are also worth 2 points. Let's just go over that first. So sacks are worth 1 point. You want teams that have a high sack rating. Last year, it was the Steelers. The Steelers led the way with 56 sacks. Then it was followed by, you could guess it, one of the best defenses in the NFL, the Rams, with 53 sacks. Then, surprisingly, the Eagles with 49, and the Bucks and the Arizona Cardinals getting 48. That makes sense why the Cardinals are winning their games, and it makes sense why the Bucks won a championship. They were able to get to the quarterback. A big thing is you got to make sure you get sacks. Also, if we go to interceptions, who led the league in interceptions last year? The Steelers again. Steelers led in that category, and that's probably why they were one of the top, actually the top fantasy defense last year. With 18 interceptions, they tied the Saints, the Dolphins, and New England, all with 18. A couple of people are tied like Kansas City with 16, and so on and so forth. Fumble recoveries, if you really want a defense that's good at fumble recoveries, last year it was the Carolina Panthers with 15. You could thank that to Brian Burns and new rookie Jeremy Chin. Brian Burns is actually a second year, so he's young too. That defense is looking young and promising. They're stacked. But are they as stacked as the Ravens with Marlon Humphreys, Calais Campbell? They don't have Matthew Judon anymore, but it's okay. They still have great corners. They have great linemen, good linebackers. You can't keep out the Ravens for too long. And surprisingly, the Cowboys and the Bengals, or the Eagles, got 13 fumble recoveries each. They were good for flyer pickups. I remember one week if you picked the Cowboys against the Cincinnati Bengals, they scored 20 fantasy points. So, hey, that can't be out of the question. If you want a team that scores defensive touchdowns, look like the Colts were your team. Colts with 3 defensive touchdowns on the year, followed by Kansas City, Jacksonville, and New England, who all have 2 touchdowns. Kansas City's a champion, also a championship defense. Yes, they didn't win the championship, but they are just a defense that likes to score off turnovers and quick plays. And that's what makes their defense, because their defense is going to give up a lot of yards, but maybe in the red zone they'll get a key interception, or maybe when they need it most they'll get an interception taken to the house that'll stomp all the defensive woes that they have. Yeah, but it's very important when it comes to those type of points, and I just told you the teams that scored the most in those statistical categories. Also, if you want a good defense, you have to make sure they don't give a lot of points allowed. I mean, that's just kind of a standard in the NFL when it comes to gauging the best defenses. Whoever gives up the least points is usually just the best defense, because you're not giving up a lot of points. Also, you start out with 10 points in fantasy football. Your defense starts out with 10 points because you have allowed 0 points. If you've allowed 1 to 6 points, you lose 3 points. If your defense has allowed 7 to 13 points, I'm not talking about fantasy points, I'm talking about real life points. Say the Oakland Raiders are playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have held the Oakland Raiders to 7 points. You would get 4 points automatically off points allowed. Your 10 points from 0 points allowed goes all the way down to 4 points. If you allow 28 to 34 points, you're in the negatives, baby. That's -1 plus 35 points. That's -4. This is pretty much going over what standard league protocol is when it comes to defensive scoring. It's very interesting just because the top 10 defenses last year in fantasy were the Colts. Then, it was the Colts, the Rams, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, then the Miami Dolphins, in that order, 1 through 5. The Colts were averaging 9.5 fantasy points last year, 15 interceptions, 40 sacks, very stout defense. They hurried the QB a lot, but a big QB hurry was mainly the Steelers with the 140 by far ahead of everyone else. The Colts had a really good defense. They have Malik Hooker. They have Darius Leonard, who's probably the best linebacker in the league. They just re-signed Xavier Rhodes to keep that secondary stout. Whenever you really, these are just statistics I'm throwing at you. I'm throwing at you what people have proven, what the numbers have shown, and not just saying, oh, these are the best defenses because I think so, because they play these people. No. So let's go over let's go a little deeper into it, because that was just the bare bones. I'm giving you statistics. I'm throwing at you who was the top, who has the most picks, who has the most fumbles. So you can see, okay, these teams are the teams that are more active than the other teams. Okay, but one of the best things when it comes to fantasy football is that you kind of got to gauge your defenses off chaos. Chaos is tackles for a loss, forced fumbles, interceptions, pass deflections, pressures. Chaos is what happens when you are just completely wrecking and creating havoc on the quarterback. Because if you press the quarterback, you don't give him a comfortable game all game, you're going to see results. We saw it in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady. They did not let Patrick Mahomes get outside of the pocket, become an improviser, which is what he's best at. They did not allow him to even get comfortable enough to throw a touchdown. He didn't throw a touchdown. He was only held to 9 points. They were tackling him in the backfield. They forced a couple fumbles. They got an interception on Patrick Mahomes too. Pass deflects for sure. And there was for sure pressure the whole game. Pressure is one of the biggest things, and that's why I said QB hurries the most was the Steelers by far. That's why they were one of the top fantasy defenses. Rushing the quarterback is going to create a recipe for, it's going to be a trickle-down effect. Not a recipe. It's going to be a recipe for disaster for the offense. But it's going to just trickle-down effect. The quarterback is getting pressured. So what does he have to do? Throw it early. What could happen if he throws it early? The receiver's not ready on his timed route, turns around too late, doesn't react on the route on time, gets intercepted. What else could happen too? He has to improvise. Maybe the receiver's not running a standard route. Maybe he ran a comeback route. Now he has to panic and start fading towards the middle of the field. It's going to create high turnover plays. What else does it happen? quarterback hurries also make quarterbacks have to rush. You have to go upfield. What could happen if you go upfield? Your quarterback could get hurt. If your quarterback gets hurt and you're stuck with your second string, like we're going to talk about the boy Joe Flacco later, what are you stuck with? You're stuck with a very difficult season like the Cowboys realized when they locked Dak Prescott. Wreaking chaos is a number one thing to worry about in fantasy defenses. If we talk about the top fantasy defense creating chaos by that method of tackle for a loss, forced fumbles, interceptions, pass deflections, and pressure on plays, the Steelers would be number one with 38% of chaos on their plays. 38%. So almost half of their plays were complete and utter chaos, which are tackles for a loss, creating forced fumbles, interceptions, a lot of high turnover plays. Then it's the Niners, then it's the Saints, and the Buccaneers, and the Bills, and that's the top five, and those are 38%, 36%, 36%, 35%. Pretty much the 1 through 10 on creating havoc, chaos plays, these chaotic, crazy plays that just completely combust an offense before your eyes. Like we saw, I can't even reiterate it enough, the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, one of the top offenses in the league, combust before your eyes because they are creating chaos. This is a big factor that you want to worry about when it comes to picking a fantasy defense. Next year, who's going to create a lot of chaos? The Broncos just added Ronald Darby and they added Kyle Fuller. Those two guys on the defensive end will help keep stout that secondary with Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson already re-signed as well. So they could have Alexander Johnson blitz. They could have Von Miller, who's back blitz. That's a team that could create a lot of havoc and create a lot of turnovers because they have good people in the secondary, Bradley Chubb and Von Miller in the on the line, and it will allow a lot of high-pressured quarterback situation plays. The Ravens have a stout secondary. They just needed to get it all together. The Ravens were still a top 4 fantasy defense last year. Let me not make you forget. And they were second with 119 QB hurries last year. In sacks, they weren't the best, but they were still top 15. That was their biggest problem. They had to really get to the quarterback. They were rushing him, though, which helped them have one of the best interception per game ratios going within the top 10. The Baltimore Ravens were a good defense. I was really high on them. I didn't know the Steelers were going to pop off. I knew they were going to pop off. I just didn't know they were going to pop off more than the Ravens because they had a Calais Campbell, who played on the Jaguars, who made that defense a lot better, who also played on the Cardinals, who made that defense a lot better. It's just fantasy defense. It doesn't always change because next year you're also seeing who's going to have a lot of QB hurries. It's guaranteed going to be the Bucs. The Bucs brought back Shaquille Barrett. They have Levante David and Devin White all at safety. At linebacker. 3 stout linebackers who could get to the quarterback, cover. It's crazy to me. And then you still have Antoine Winfield in the back. Junior. He still has a lot to learn, won a Super Bowl, but is still very hungry. That defense is going to rush to people as well. Another thing you want to look at besides that chaotic factor, you want to look at their strength of schedule. You want to look at who they play. AFC East quarterbacks. AFC East opponents going into next year in the 2021 year. Say you want to get the Patriots defense or the Bills defense. Or the Dolphins defense. You know what? The Dolphins were a top 5 fantasy defense last year, averaging a little over 8 points a game. Let's talk about the Dolphins too. The Dolphins, all these teams are going to play either the NFC South and the AFC South. So you're going to have those defenses going against at least Tom Brady, the Saints, maybe the newly revamped Carolina Panthers offense, and the Bucs. Oh, I said the Bucs. And the Falcons, who are good one year, terrible the next, great next year, terrible the next. They just got rid of their head coach, so now maybe things are on the up and up for them. It depends on how they do in the draft. They still have Julio. They still have Calvin Ridley. They just signed Mike Davis because I don't know if they re-signed Todd Gurley yet. But yes, those defense, just expect them. They're going to go against those great NFC South teams. Luckily, Drew Brees isn't there, so that at least helps. But then with the same side, you might want to get those AFC East teams on some waiver wire streamer weeks because they also play against the AFC South. They're going to go against the Jaguars, who could be good next year, but just know rookie quarterbacks don't always come in and create an 8-8 year. Trevor Lawrence still has to pay his dues, may go 5-11, 6-10. Doesn't mean he's not going to have a great fantasy year. Just means he might not have the best record in the world. Might have a Joe Burrow type year. But he's going against the Jaguars. The Colts are a good team. I'll give you that. But you're going, and the Titans, but the Jaguars and the Texans, that's enticing because the Texans are going to stink next year, especially if they have Tyrod Taylor at the helm. So AFC East quarterbacks, just expect you're going to be going against some pretty good quarterbacks. You're going against Ryan Tannehill. You're going to go against Carson Wentz on the Colts, not just the standard Carson Wentz. I'm not high on Carson Wentz, but some people are. And we'll talk about that more later on the show. But you're going against Tom Brady as well, Jameis Winston, Matt Ryan, and Teddy Bridgewater or whoever the quarterback is on the Carolina Panthers. If you go to the AFC North side, AFC North quarterbacks have to play against the NFC North and the AFC West. So if you want to pick a defense from the Steelers or the Ravens, which are the top defenses, the Browns are on the up and up. They just got John Johnson and Troy Hill from the Rams, so they literally added Rams to their defense on top of their already top 10 pass rushing defense when it comes to Myles Garrett over there. So they're going to go against the NFC North. So if you want the Steelers or them, just expect they're going to go against Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, but they will also go against Jared Goff. Yes, Jared Goff and whoever the Bears are throwing out there, which is probably Andy Dalton. So if you could get an AFC North defense like the Steelers, and then they also play the AFC West, which, okay, I'll give you. Patrick Mahomes is great, but come on. You could just sit him that week and pick up a flyer. You could pick up someone streaming off the week. Like, maybe the Eagles have a good defense. You see that to create a lot of chaos like they did last year. They're one of the top fumble recovering teams and sack teams. So they get pressure on the quarterback. But they're going against the AFC West. They're going to go against still the Broncos, who are unproven. Justin Herbert, who might have a sophomore slump. AFC North defenses, that's a good option. That is a good option. AFC South, we know they're going against the NFC West and the AFC East. So if you want to get the Colts defense, which is probably the only formidable defense out there in the AFC South, just know they're going to go against Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Jimmy Garoppolo, or whoever the Niners quarterback is next year, and Matt Stafford. So that's not good. And then if you want them also, then they also have to go against Josh Allen. Hopefully the Patriots just stick with Cam Newton, Sam Darnold, but mainly just Josh Allen. Josh Allen and Tua. So they have to go against Josh Allen, Tua, Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford. Just know the Colts defense, you might have to temper a little more next year. Even though they're really stacked and stout, they have a tougher schedule to go against. AFC West, if you're going with the Broncos defense or the Chiefs defense, you could probably pick them up on a flyer because they're playing against the Cowboys next year, the Eagles next year, and the Giants and the football team. Yes, that division looks like it may be going on the up and up, but still we have seen what we have seen, and we have seen teams go 8-8 out of that division. That defense could be in for some good games if you pick up a Chargers, Chiefs, or a Bronco defense. Not really the Raiders defense. That's not what they're known for. They're also going to go against the AFC North, so they'll go against the Big Ben. They'll go against Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield. I'm not too confident on that. AFC West defenses, you might want to temper a little more too. NFC East, we're getting to the other side. So if you want the Eagles defense, pretty much Eagles defense or the Washington football defense, they're going against the Broncos, Patrick Mahomes, Chargers, and then Tom Brady and the rest of that group in the NFC South. So NFC East defenses, I wouldn't be too hot on because you have to go against the stacked quarterbacks in the West, and you have to go against Tom Brady and friends in the South. Matt Ryan's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. NFC North, if you're picking a Packers defense, not Bears, not Vikings, or Lions. So if you're just only picking the Packers defense, just expect them to go against Lamar Jackson in that run, go against the Cleveland Browns in that run. I don't think they have a great rush defense like they didn't last year. They're one of the bottom 20. They're on the bottom third of the NFL in rush defense. There's no way that I see that changing, especially against all these top rush offenses. And they still have to go against the Niners. Then they have to go against They have to go against the Niners. They have to go against the Seahawks, who like to run the ball all the time. They have to go against the Rams, who like to run the ball all the time. And the Cardinals, who have Kyler Murray running all over the place. Don't draft the Packers on defense. NFC South, if you want Tampa Bay, only one, Tampa Bay. Or the Saints. They're going to go against Cam Newton, the Jets, and maybe Tua unless he's hurt. But Josh Allen, that's a week you might not want to start him. But it's good, though. Then they play the NFC East. They have the Cowboys, the football team, the Eagles. I like NFC South defense. I like the Saints and the Bucks going into next year. I like them along with the AFC South opponents too. Not AFC South. I meant AFC North defenses as well. AFC North and the NFC South are defenses that I would probably like going into next year based off strength of schedule. NFC West opponents, you got the Rams, you got the Seahawks, you got the Niners who could bounce back next year. They have to go against the AFC South, which isn't that strong. It's only the Titans and the Colts. Bottom's going to be Jags and Texans, and then the NFC North. But they only have to go through the Packers. They could still get lucky and play. They still have to play the Vikings. They play the Lions, which I don't think Jared Goff's going to do much with. And they're going to play the Bears, who have Andy Dalton, and that says volumes. That says volumes. Strength of schedule is an important thing when it comes to focusing on fantasy defenses. You want to focus on good fantasy defenses. Last year, if we were to just go over who the top fantasy defenses were, number 1 was the Colts, as I said, the Rams, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Dolphins. Then the bottom 5 is the football team, Saints, Bucks, Bills, and Chiefs. These guys I all like going into next year. I would probably say the most I like out of these two defenses, I like the Bucks defense the most, the Rams defense the most. The Bucks are going to have a decent schedule to go against, and it's not going to be too difficult for them to take on the South. The Ravens defense has a lot to prove, but Miami's a bunch of dogs, and that defense is different on that team. So Miami averaged 8.8 fantasy points per game. The Rams averaged 9.44 fantasy points per game, and the Bucks averaged 7.44. So they're not much of sleepers, but I like them. If you really want a deep sleeper, I would go with... It's just tough before the draft. You have to see how the draft works, but I like the Cardinals. The Cardinals rushed the quarterback a lot. They rushed him over 100 times last year. They still had over 48. They were still top 5 in sacks. Cardinals were still one of the top intercepting teams in the league. I like them going into next year as a top defense. Yeah. But those are things that could help constitute picking a big time fantasy defense next year. Most of the time, I don't like to draft. You could get them before the draft. But next year, I think a golden one is the Bucks. The Bucks stood together. They kept everyone on that defense. I forgot to mention, they kept Ndamukong Suh. They just re-signed him this past day. Ndamukong Suh, Shaquille Barrett, Devin White, Levante Davis. That's just the front right now. Along with Jason Pierre-Paul, and then you still have Antoine Winfield in the back and a stout, young offensive line for Tom Brady. Yeah, no. The Bucks are going to keep the ball away from people. They have a good schedule again next year. I wouldn't doubt if they went to the NFC Championship. That's just football stuff, but I'm just saying, this is what constitutes for a great NFL defense. Yeah, I think it's very important because defenses win championships, and your defense could really screw you in a fantasy championship. You could be up 6 points going against someone else, but if your fantasy defense scores negative 4 points, or negative 8 points, because it's been done before, you'll lose. You'll lose by 1. You'll be mad. You'll be mad that you didn't listen to this podcast and try to become a champion like I'm trying to make everyone. We still have to talk about free agency, but next we're going to talk about all the people I would take over T.Y Hilton in this next fantasy draft. Yeah, I don't know if I'm sold on the boy. Even with Carson Wentz, I'm not sold, but check that out after this commercial break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
are back at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, where we make champions around here. 2021 is going to be full of champions, and I can't wait for all you guys to message me all your championship stuff. I'm going to be nothing but proud of you guys, and I'm going to be like a proud dad. Like, wow, you finally made it. Now I'm still going to have to pay for you till you're like 29 years old and move out of the house. No, I'm kidding. Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Things have been slowing down a bit in the NFL. All the crazy signings happened last week. We're getting closer to the NFL draft, which I'm really, really excited about, and we'll break down all the people who could be good in fantasy. One of the biggest signings to me, and maybe not to other people, and that is why it's one of the top priorities on the show today, is T.Y Hilton. Signed a one-year deal, $10 million extension, $8 million guaranteed. The 31-year-old receiver last year had 56 catches, 762 yards, and 5 touchdowns on 93 targets. I don't know why people still draft T.Y Hilton. I don't draft him. Ever since Andrew Luck was done, he was done. That was Andrew Luck's boy. Now it's not. T.Y Hilton is a thing of the past now. Stop talking about it. It was a big discussion with me, and I actually got a little heated earlier because I was talking to one of my best friends and colleagues, and I was saying, man, who would you rather draft, Michael Gallup or T.Y Hilton? And he had the audacity to tell me T.Y Hilton like Dak Prescott isn't his quarterback. My friend's a Cowboys fan. I expected better from him, but I shouldn't expect better because, once again, I said it, he's a Cowboy fan. So I don't understand what this whole hype on T.Y Hilton is. He's like, well, and I said, why would you draft T.Y Hilton? I said, well, he's got Carson Wentz down. Wrong. That's a reason to not draft T.Y Hilton and fade him. Carson Wentz is not reliable. He's fickled. He is washed goods. He is not ready anymore. He could have a decent year next year, but is he going to be giving T.Y Hilton these stellar years Andrew Luck gave him? Like, oh yeah, let's talk about his 2015 year, which people still like to refer to, 2015 and 2016. He had played all 16 games. Yeah, that's a shocker nowadays. He had 91 catches in 2016, 69 catches in 2015. It didn't matter. He had 1,100 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns in those 2 years. So he had over 2,500 yards and 11 touchdowns in 2 years off 170 receptions. That's what T.Y Hilton was doing because he was averaging his play. He's a long play guy. So his average per catch was 16.3 yards per catch, 15.9 yards per catch. It didn't start declining until now. Let's talk about the past 2 years. No, let's keep talking about his greatness because I want people to get it out the way. Okay, I'll keep gassing up T.Y Hilton for all you fans out there. He's third in franchise history in all-time receiving yards at 9,360. And you know who he's behind. He's behind Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne, the 2 best receivers of all time. I don't get why people think Carson Wentz is going to help him. What receiver, and I'm not saying tight end, Zach Ertz, I'm saying receiver, has Carson Wentz really made a viable fantasy option? Let me tell you, Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar are the only ones. After that, no one. T.Y Hilton, the past 2 years, let's talk about the digression, and this is what I'm talking about. He's only played 10 games in 2019. He had 45 catches, 500 yards, and you know that 16 yards average per catch that he was averaging with the Andrew Luck? Yeah, those are gone now. He went from 16.7 yards in 2018 to 11.1 in 2019, a 6-yard difference. His longest of the year was a 35-yard catch. Before that, his shortest long of the year in his whole career was 63 yards. That was the shortest long he had on the year. Now he's having 35-yard long. That means they're not giving it to him deep anymore. He has 5 touchdowns last year. That's typical, but he's not getting the long plays and what you want. See, and then in Andrew Luck years, he had 62 first downs in 2014. He had 66 first downs in 2016. And then you look at 2019, 24 first downs. He's not moving the chains. Not helping them at all. First down percentage, 53%. 20-yard plays downfields, he was averaging 21, then 17 one year, then 28 in 2017, then even 14 when Andrew Luck left. That 2019 year, he got 6 20-plus yard catches. Oh, and let's talk about his 40-yard catches because every single year he at least had one, right? And not even one to say the least. He had 5, 6, 6, 6, 2, 6, 6. And I'm dating back all the way to his 2012 rookie year. He goes for the deep ball. He had 0 40-yard catches. And if that all didn't infuriate you, you thought, hey, Philip Rivers a gunslinger. Now he's going to help out. Wrong. Then let's fast forward to 2020. He played 15 games, 5 more games, only had 200 more yards in 5 more games. That means he had 40 more yards per game. He averaged only 2 more yards per catch, had only 9 more catches on 5 more games. As I said, 5 more games. His long was 50 yards, had the same amount of touchdowns, only had 12 more first downs, and his 20-yard plays, yes, they went up from 6 to 11, and he went up from 0 40-yard plays to 3 40-yard plays. But T.Y. Hilton, you're washed. And I just gave you a whole 7 minutes on why you're washed. So now, we are going to reach into my favorite magic hat. I put a bunch of names in there of fantasy receivers, and we are going to see if I would draft these guys based off stats and situation alone more than T.Y. Hilton. And when I mean situation, I mean what team currently has them and what weapons are around them and what that means for the offense. Let's see. First name. A.J. Brown, Tennessee Titans receiver. Yes. You know I am high on A.J. Brown if you listen to this show. 70 catches, 1,075 yards, and 11 touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton hasn't had 11 touchdowns since ever. So that's just really what that is. And the last time T.Y. Hilton had 1,000 yards and 70 catches was 3 years ago. So will he go back to his 3-year-ago glory? I don't think so. A.J. Brown is also slated to be alongside Josh Reynolds, which should open up A.J. Brown a lot more. We'll talk about Josh Reynolds a little later. T.Y. Hilton, yes, does have Michael Pittman, but that's it. Michael Pittman is going to warrant some attention, but not the most. What helps him is that people will stay in the box for the Colts because they're going to be scared of that crazy run game that they have. But I feel like they're going to pass it to Nyheim Hines, Mo Alley Cox, Trey Burton, Jack Doyle. I'm going to keep going over this, but yes, A.J. Brown. Michael Thomas, the wasted first-round pick I had last year and traded. I had him a year before that, and he was awesome. Took me to a fantasy championship. I lost that year, but it's okay. We can't win every year, but the point is to win every year. So don't let that pass by. Actually, I'm sorry. I caught myself. We try to win every year. I don't even care. Michael Thomas gave us a stinky year last year, 40 catches, 438 yards, but there's no Emmanuel Sanders, no Jared Cook. Jameis Winston might be the starting quarterback. If he is the starting quarterback, they are going to throw it a lot and throw it deep a lot. Michael Thomas's 438 yards, a lot of it was because of his leg injuries and because of contract disputes and him just being a diva. I would still try to get Michael Thomas before I would get T.Y. Hilton. I know these are more obvious ones. Another obvious one, Allen Robinson, number 9 receiver last year, but he has Andy Dalton. Is Andy Dalton going to be good? Yes, he still made Amari Cooper a top 20 fantasy receiver. Allen Robinson had 102 catches, 1,250 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He still has Darnell Mooney on the other side, who's an emerging, going to be a sophomore year receiver. So Allen Robinson, yes, of course, I am drafting you over T.Y. Hilton. I expect you to at least give me the 7 touchdowns next year and 1,000 yards. T.Y. Hilton has given me 7 touchdowns and 1,000 yards since 2014. Let's start picking a little more. Okay. Deontay Johnson, slot receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Deontay Johnson's an interesting situation because there's so much love to give around. Should I trust him? T.Y. Hilton, yes, he may not be as good as he was. Oh, did I mention he's 31? Who wants a 31-year-old receiver? Yes, I did mention that T.Y. Hilton is pretty much still kind of the best receiver on that core because Michael Pittman's still emerging, even though he's bigger and faster and younger. T.Y. Hilton still has the breakaway speed to score touchdowns and big playability. But Deontay Johnson, I don't even care if Juju Smith-Schuster came back. I don't even care if Chase Claypool starts just doing whatever he does because he's now a TikTok diva too. Deontay Johnson is going to have a better year than T.Y. Hilton. He's going to have over 90 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Do you want me to ask the last time T.Y. Hilton did that? Oh, 2016. T.Y. Hilton, if you haven't done something in 5 years, you're washed. I'm not drafting I'm drafting Deontay Johnson way before. T.Y Hilton, DJ Moore. He has Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. Why would you draft him over T.Y Hilton? Because T.Y Hilton stinks. And at least Teddy Bridgewater can give it to DJ Moore 66 times for 1,100 yards on deep plays. DJ Moore averaged more yards down average per catch with at least 18. He was number 2 on Pro Football Focus rankings. He only had 4 touchdowns, and that's what is tampering him. But if you're saying that T.Y Hilton's 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns in the last 3 years, if I got to name how many touchdowns he scored per year, that's nothing more impressive. He's only scored a touchdown or 2 more. So DJ Moore. What about Kenny Golladay? Kenny Golladay just got signed by the New York Giants, 4 years, $72 million. The only reason I could think of why they would sign Kenny Golladay, or why Kenny Golladay would sign there, more like it, because of course they want him, is that Kenny ends with NY. And you could make some cool t-shirts out of that, and you made a lot of money. So Kenny Golladay only had 20 catches. Kenny Golladay. You ever heard that song by Green Day? No? I hope I'm not getting too old. 20 catches, 338 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. Like I said, he didn't want to play for the Lions. Next year, I expect him to have 75 catches, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Last time T.Y. did that for me was 2018. And look, I know Daniel Jones isn't the best, but you can't, while they will kind of 100% focus on Kenny Golladay, but once they start realizing that Darius Slayton starts spreading open the field more, because Darius Slayton is still a viable option, along with Sterling Shepard. Oh, let's not forget, one of the top 10 best slots in the league right now. He's still a good streamer option. If you have PPR, he will at least get you 10 points a game when he's healthy. Kenny Golladay, along with Saquon Barkley in that backfield, will be a threat and at least give you way better numbers than T.Y. Let's go CeeDee Lamb. Let's reach a little more. CeeDee Lamb, who had 74 catches for 935 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had 20 more catches than T.Y. last year, 200 more yards, and same amount of touchdowns. But the thing about CeeDee Lamb is Dak Prescott's way better than Carson Wentz. And I don't even care who the line is, because Dak Prescott's a mobile quarterback who will improvise and give it to CeeDee Lamb. If you notice in the beginning of last year, Dak Prescott was trying to find CeeDee Lamb as much as he could. That 3-headed monster in the Cowboys is probably one of the best receiving corps in the league, with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. You can't ignore that. I would much feel more comfortable with CeeDee Lamb. T. Higgins, one of my sleeper top 10 fantasy receivers next year. Am I going to get him over T.Y.? Oh, yeah. 67 catches, 908 yards, 6 touchdowns. Gave me a better year last year in his rookie year. We know what T. Higgins could do because he's a national championship winner on Clemson in the big time. Next year when Joe Burrow stays healthy, because in PPR he was averaging at least 10 points a game. He ranked 28th, but still he's going to be a top 10 fantasy PPR machine next year. He's going to get at least 80 catches, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. Last time T.Y. could do that for me was 2016. So yes, I would for sure draft him over T.Y. Hilton. Let's go to Robbie Anderson. Wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, 95 catches, 1,000 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's not going to give you as many touchdowns because Robbie's a deep play guy. He had more 40-plus plays and more 20-plus yard catches than T.Y. last year. That's what he's going to do all year. He's going to give you the same numbers, 90 catches, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. Not as much touchdowns, but you love that he's getting at least 7 to 8 catches a game, and he's going to top it off with 1,000 yards, which T.Y. hasn't done for you since 2018. And he fell off on 2017 too, so yeah. What about his counterpart? Michael Pittman Jr. We're really digging into it right now. Michael Pittman, 40 catches, 503 yards, and 1 touchdown next year. Am I getting him over T.Y.? Yeah. Yeah, I like his potential. The USC product is shown that he's a big body. You could use him in the red zone a lot. Frank Reich's going to realize how to utilize him a little more this year. I expect a 70-catch, almost 1,000-yard season and 5 touchdowns. It's going to replicate T.Y., so it's really who do you want between the two. But I feel like Michael Pittman's going to break out more. Michael Pittman should have been on the Packers. Imagine him as Aaron Rodgers' red zone target. Oh, be elite, but he has Carson Wentz. Yeah. Odell Beckham Jr. had 23 catches, 319 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I am not drafting Odell Beckham Jr. over T.Y. Hilton. I am getting T.Y. in 10th, 11th round, wherever I'm getting him. I am not even risking getting this diva because he's been getting hurt the last 3 years. He's had at least 3 different injuries to his foot in the last 3 years. I don't trust him coming back from a year-long out. And once again, where are they going to fit him in that offense? They were doing completely fine without him. They're a heavy running offense. He's going to have the same amount as T.Y. 60 catches, 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. I'm not scared of Odell Beckham. He's just as good as T.Y., except you're going to have to get him way higher, which is something I'm not flying with. Curtis Samuel, 77 catches, 851 yards, 3 touchdowns last year when he used to be on the Carolina Panthers. Now, he's on the Washington football team with Taylor Heineke, alongside with his Ohio State partner Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson. You got to worry about him and J.D. McKissick in the backfield, so that's a big thing. I like Curtis Samuel over T.Y. He's going to get you 80 catches, 900 yards, and I think like 7 touchdowns because he's the gadget gizmo guy. So they could run it in with him at the red zone. They could give him a quick little screen pass. Ron Rivera is going to utilize him, and there's a reason why Ron Rivera is getting him after he was with him on the Panthers before, because he liked him, so he's going to try to make sure he could give it to his boy. The football team is a good fantasy-friendly offense. Let's go to the next name. There's a lot of names in this hat. Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk has 60 catches, 748 yards, and 5 touchdowns with Jimmy Garoppolo and the Niners. First of all, they didn't realize how good Brandon Ayuk was. He was hurt more than 4 games last year. They didn't realize how good he was as well because he was a rookie, barely coming out. Jimmy G is not the best quarterback. Then they had to go to Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard. The Niners, if they could keep Jimmy G healthy, Brandon Ayuk is someone who's a sleeper candidate, could get 1,000 yards and like 10 touchdowns next year. Because George Kittle, once again, is someone who's finicky because he gets hurt all the time. And Deebo Samuel gets hurt sometimes too. He broke his foot last year. Can't broke-the-did your foot. And don't think I made a mistake on that. I know what I did. You can't broke-the-did your foot and come back and always be stellar. Brandon Ayuk definitely drafting over T.Y. Hilton. Devontae Parker, Miami Dolphins receiver. Now he's going to be alongside Will Fuller, who I didn't even put him in this hat because I would definitely take him because he's going to have over 1,000 yards next year. Will Fuller, 63 catches, 793 yards, and 4 touchdowns last year, and that was him being hurt 5 games. So next year with Tua's a little inconsistent. There's no Ryan Fitzpatrick to back him up, but there's still Jacoby Brissett, but I don't like him more than Ryan. If you have to get Devontae Parker in the first 5 rounds, fade him. I'd rather get Jamar Chase or even Devontae Smith. But if you could get Devontae Parker in 8th, 9th round, get Devontae Parker over T.Y. Hilton. If not, just wait to get T.Y. Hilton later. Jarvis Landry, 72 catches, 840 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's just all going to be taken away if Odell Beckham comes back. He had 3 touchdowns. Expect less because they like to run it in the end zone. Odell Beckham's going to cry for touchdowns too. You still got to give it to Austin Hooper. Baker Mayfield always doesn't make the best decision, so he's just going to go to his tight end as a security blanket and like a valve, it's like security valve. Just I need to rush to this guy just so I could score and not have anybody yell at me. Baker's kind of finicky like that. Let's go to the next name. Michael Gallup, receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. We just talked about him. 59 catches, 843 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He's going to have something similar to that. He's basically going to have a T.Y. year. So if you're going to have a choice in the 8th round between Michael Gallup or 9th round or 10th round between Michael Gallup and T.Y., get Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup does what T.Y. used to do back in the day. Dak is going to come back. I know there's more love on one of the best receiving cores, especially fantasy receiving cores in the NFL. But I still believe he's going to give me 65 catches, 900 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Last time T.Y. did that for me was 3 years ago, so Michael Gallup. Cole Beasley. They just added Gabriel Davis, Emmanuel Sanders. Well, they have Gabriel Davis, who's good. They have Emmanuel Sanders now, and they have Stephon Diggs, along with Cole Beasley, who's still going to get his. Had 82 catches, 967 yards, and 4 touchdowns. You have to focus on Josh Allen. Those legs are too vital, and you have to focus on Stephon Diggs because he gets the ball and gets forced the ball a lot of times. Along with Gabriel Davis, who's going to fly down the field, and then, Emmanuel Sanders, who's a great route runner. Cole Beasley's going to get open more than T.Y. Hilton, and I trust Josh Allen way more than I trust Carson Wentz, and they would rather throw the ball 50 times a game than run the ball with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. And I have Gabriel Davis. Oh, perfect. Back to back. Gabriel Davis. He had 35 catches, 599 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He still had more touchdowns than T.Y. hasn't scored 7 touchdowns since 2014. So Gabriel Davis is still someone I would even pick. Next year, I feel like he would do better than Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley to me. I feel like he'll have 50 catches, 950 yards, and 10 touchdowns because Gabriel Davis is going to take that John Brown role to the next level. Josh Reynolds, Tennessee Titans receiver, I talked about him. He's going to get like 900 yards next year or maybe 1,000. He's going to do what Corey Davis did. Corey Davis had over 70 receptions for over 980 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's going to do the same exact thing I expect going into next year on that Tennessee Titans offense. All these people, every single person I pretty much have said over T.Y Hilton, except Odell Beckham. So maybe this is just an Odell Beckham shade show. But let me know what you think on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Because I'm just trying to really gas up or gas down T.Y Hilton. Because people have to stop giving this guy all this clout when he's not that good. And Carson Wentz isn't going to make that much of a difference. But that's just what I think. Let us know what you think at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast on all of our social networks. When we come back, we're going to talk about some free agency. It hasn't been going up too crazy, but there's some key signings that have some big fantasy football implications. Make sure to listen after the commercial. We are the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, and we make champions over here.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for sticking around. We are going to get into some free agency frenzy, as I like to call it. The free agents aren't as blockbuster as they were last week when I was talking about all the free agents, such as Shaquille Barrett, Chris Godwin, even Kenny Galladay the other day when I was talking about him. These guys are maybe a little lower tier guys, but their impact on their team could still hold a lot of fantasy implications. Make sure at the end of the show you stick around as I give you the art of the trade. The NBA trade deadline had me thinking, how do I trade everyone every year in my fantasy league? And they always tell me, how do you get these crazy, absurd trades off? And they're super consensual. It's not like I yell at someone or force them or stick a knife down their throat and say, hey, you got to give me this player. Otherwise, I'm going to, I don't know, we'll keep it PG here, going to kick you in the shin. But the point is, I like to trade a lot, so stick around at the end of the show because I'm going to teach you what I do and what I kind of think going into each and every trade that I make in fantasy football. I've been doing it for years. I would honestly say I'm a better trader than I am a better drafter. Sometimes I don't draft too hot, but I see the potential in who I draft, and I could still sell it to someone else to trade trade with them. I always point out all the people I traded for this year. We'll talk about it more at the end of the show. But first, let's talk about these free agents and all the new teams that they have signed for, or some who have stayed in the same spot. Not many, though. The first, Damian Williams, ex-running back of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins, the 6-year vet. Well, he's only played 6 years, actually. He didn't get a play last year because he hurt himself in the offseason. He is signing a 1-year deal with the Chicago Bears. So they have David Montgomery and Tyreek Cohen in Chicago. David Montgomery is a great fantasy option going into next year because he's just a beast. He carries that team just by himself. But Tyreek Cohen was out all last year with the ACL injury. So will Tyreek Cohen come back to normal? Who knows? He's a very shifty and big play guy. He's all about breaking tackles, stopping on a dime, hitting the hole as fast as he can, catching a lot of balls in the open space. He's a tiny guy too. He's also around 5'5", 5'6", so he's not that big to begin with. So if he were to get hurt again, these guys are big in the NFL. They're big boys. Damian Williams would be in line for some work. Damian Williams has already proven on the Kansas City Chiefs that he could do it in the season where he had probably his breakout season after Kareem Hunt had to leave. He had 111 rushes for 498 yards, 5 touchdowns. And yeah, we all remember the greatness of Damian Williams. He was averaging 4.5 carries per game. He would get 35 to 30 targets a year. It was good when he was in Kansas City. Because in Kansas City, you had Patrick Mahomes, you had the Chiefs, you had a very spread out offense, and that does not let people focus on the undrafted rookie, or not the undrafted rookie, the undrafted talent of Damian Williams coming out of Kansas City. Him going to the Bears is a good move and a sneaky and sleeper fantasy pick. I think that if you have David Montgomery, you have to handcuff him with Damian Williams, because if David Montgomery gets hurt, which he does on average, he's missed at least 2 games in the past 2 years. David Montgomery will get hurt a game or two, and you can have Damian Williams in that line of backup, and you know what he can do and produce. He could catch out of the backfield. He could run out of the backfield. He has proven that he is ready for the big time. He scored his touchdown in the Super Bowl when the Kansas City Chiefs beat the San Francisco 49ers. Number 26, Kansas City running back. I like this move for the Bears. I don't like many moves for the Bears, but this is a good move. I think that he's one of the only guys that I'd really talk about that I would think about getting in fantasy. All these other free agents, they are good streamer options or good options if the main guy were to get hurt. Speaking about if the main guy were to get hurt, Jalen Hurts, quarterback of the Eagles, now has a new backup in Philadelphia. Yeah, I said it like that on purpose. Joe Flacco. Some call him elite. I just call him an SOB because the simple fact is Joe Flacco destroyed the Broncos, and I am a Bronco fan, on his Baltimore Ravens run where he has 10 touchdowns, no interceptions throughout the whole playoffs. That is a big reason why people still call Joe Flacco elite. He played for the Jets last year. He played 5 games, started 4, was hurt for the rest of the year, lost all 4 of the games he played for. 55% completion percentage, 864 yards throwing, 6 touchdowns, 3 picks, really average. It's just a slow decline. I mean, if you look at the last 4 years, even go back to 5 years, he threw for 4,300 yards in Baltimore. Then the next year he threw for 3,100 yards in Baltimore. Then the next year in Baltimore he threw for 2,400 yards. Granted, he missed some games. Then 1,800. Then we're in the now at 800. Joe Flacco is going to destroy your Eagles offense if he comes on the field. You need Jalen Hurts to be active. I know. Why are we talking about Joe Flacco if we're really talking about fantasy football and this guy wants to make us champions? I'm just telling you what could happen if you have Miles Sanders. What if you have Jalen Reagor and you're really high on him, the wide receiver out of the Philadelphia Eagles? You're really high on these 2 guys. You're going to draft them in your draft. What's going to happen if Jalen Hurts gets hurt? What if you draft Jalen Hurts? The thing is, you could say, oh, well, he might not get hurt or anything. Jalen Hurts is a mobile quarterback. He's going to be running up the field, getting hit by these big guys constantly. You're telling me there's no chance he gets hurt? There's at least a tiny chance, and I don't wish it upon him, but it's just being realistic and always knowing and thinking about the backup plans. That's how we win championships here on the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We think about everything. We dissect the whole game of fantasy football. That's why I always have these wacky segments, just so you could kind of see every single way I see the NFL and what it implies going into fantasy football. Joe Flacco is leaving the Jets for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know what the Eagles are looking for in Joe Flacco because, I mean, what's good is he's elite, and with air quotes in a sarcastic sense, but he's at least have playoff experience. He's done a lot. He has the veteranship. He could lead a team. I don't know about now, but he has led a team to a championship, and that holds a lot of weight in the locker room. So, Joe Flacco is now the backup on the Philadelphia Eagles. He left the Jets, and you know who went in on the Jets? Running back Tevin Coleman. Used to be the running back of the San Francisco 49ers, and prior to that, we all know him on the Atlanta Falcons. He has played 6 years in the NFL, going on into his 7th year. The San Francisco running back was hurt most of last year, so he literally played 8 games, only started 1, rushed for 28 times, 53 yards, 0 touchdowns. He didn't even catch a touchdown. He only had 4 catches for 34 yards. A very slow year. If you go to the best Tevin Coleman year, you're going back to Atlanta when it was kind of almost his show. He started 14 games, 167 rush yards, 167 rushes for 800 yards, 4 touchdowns. Caught the ball 32 times for 276 yards and 5 touchdowns. Nothing that special about Tevin Coleman, but just know that he's going to be in that Jets offense, which could open up a lot of things for people. Sam Darnold may get flustered sometimes because he is a rookie quarterback. Well, not a rookie, but this is going to be his 3rd year. He's still a young guy. I know he's supposed to already get it, but it's going to take some time, especially with the way Jets mature quarterbacks. So, Sam Darnold has Jamison Crowder, Keelan Cole, and Corey Davis. So they'll have Jamison Crowder on the slot, Keelan Cole outside, Corey Davis, a stout, wide receiving core. They're giving it to Sam Darnold, so he can't complain anymore. All of them are at least going to go for over 500 yards receiving. Hopefully one of them gets 1,000 yards. I think Corey Davis is the closest. Then it would be Jamison Crowder, then Keelan Cole. Keelan Cole was still a good threat in Jacksonville. But the point is, you have all 3 of these guys with Sam Darnold who can also move with his legs. He's going to have to check down sometimes if people are focusing too much on the receivers because the running game is going to be lackluster for the New York Giants because, they still have Frank Gore. And now they have at least Tevin Coleman. If Tevin Coleman can't stay healthy, he could be a good pass-catching back. And if they have an easy matchup, it could help him in the long run. It could help you win 1 week in fantasy. And that's all it takes sometimes. You literally just need to win 1 week of fantasy. He's going to be playing against the Broncos, the AFC West, and the Chiefs. You don't know. He might go off on the Chiefs. Chiefs don't have a great rush defense. He goes against the Chargers, the Raiders. They don't have the best rush defenses in the world, too. And the AFC North, he's going to go against the Lions. What if he goes off on the Lions because the Lions are the Lions? You never know. Tevin Coleman could be a good flyer. Just keep him in the back of your mind. Don't draft him, but keep him in the back of your mind. These are current free agent moves that are happening. That's why we're talking about them. And we're talking about the fantasy implications that goes with them because they are just a domino in the whole train of dominoes that brings you to a championship in the NFL. You have to look at every single piece and always be active. Now it's time to talk about one of my favorite football players, one of the guys that Tom Brady reveres the most, and I wish he would have actually pulled through and went on the Bucs. James White. James White signed a 1-year deal for $2.5 million with the New England Patriots. He has played since 2014, so this is going to be going on his 7th year. James White has progressively gotten better, and no one wants to give him a chance. He's just a pass-catching back, and no one likes to give him the chance to run the ball so much because that's not what he does. His prime years are him catching 87 balls. That's Alvin Kamara type stuff. 72 balls in 2019, and those pretty much 2 years, over 150 catches, and 1,300 yards is what James White was doing in his heyday. 12 touchdowns, 2 in those 2 combined years. James White was averaging 5 yards per catch because he was just a PPR machine. Oh, Tom Brady doesn't want to throw deep because his arm's a little old? Let me just turn around. He's going to give me a little 5-yard route. James White is now re-signing with the New England Patriots, which could help them with their weapons because they now have Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, and now James White. James White is a running back that's always going to get respect in that Patriots locker room. First of all, I know that they respect him a lot because one time Rex Burkhead was doing an interview last year when James White's James White's not grandma. James White's parents passed away. So James White's parents passed away, and James White couldn't play a game, and everyone cried in the locker room because they felt bad for him because he worked so hard, and you just always think, how can such a terrible thing happen to such a nice person? But that's just how the world kind of operates. Not to make things sad, but it just showed how much they revere him in that locker room. I know how much Tom Brady loved him after that Super Bowl performance where he caught and rushed a touchdown to help him win the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history when they were down 28-3 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. James White was a engineer in those offensive runs where they would score touchdowns because he scored 2 touchdowns to close out the games. James White's respected. He does a lot of work. He comes in. Cam Newton can't throw far all the time. If and only if James White starts catching the ball more frequently, I would say wait till the 10th round and above to draft him. Just for the simple fact that I like to call Bill Belichick's running backs Bill Belichicks. It's Belichicks. It's a play on words, obviously. I'm not trying to make you sound dumb, but yes. He likes to just put in a running back that he likes of the week. Oh, he does it like he does ice cream. Oh, I think I just want a strawberry scoop today. Tomorrow I'll get raspberry. So this week, we're going to try James White and Damian Harris. Next week, we'll try Sony Michel. We'll bring him out. I know Sony Michel hasn't done anything for 4 games, but we'll bring him out. We'll just throw the defense off track. And yeah, we'll have both of them. Oh, there'll be a rookie running back we'll just throw in there too. Like Brandon Bolden. I know he's not on the team anymore, but he used to vulture all of the rushes from James White and Sony Michel. Oh, today we'll just rush with Cam Newton, especially now that they have Cam Newton as rushing quarterback. Or we'll just rush with Cam Newton. Yeah, so James White, always keep an eye out on him because of just all the respect he has on the Patriots locker room. And offenses will be geared towards him because the Patriots will be down because they have to play these high-powered offenses like the Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills now. Yes, I know it sounds random that I'm saying those two, but yes, the Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. You don't know about the New York Jets because they have a lot of weapons, but they're the worst-ran franchise, so I wouldn't put my money on it. The point is, they have to throw the ball. They might check it down a lot to James White. Speaking about throwing the ball, one of Patrick Mahomes' targets, Demarcus Robinson just re-signed today with the Kansas City Chiefs on a 1-year deal. He caught 45 balls last year for 466 yards, 3 touchdowns. He didn't run it too much. He only ran it 1 time. But Demarcus Robinson is a good stretch player. He's a good person to just give the ball when everyone else is guarded because you have Tyreek Hill getting double-teamed, Travis Kelce getting double-teamed, and Patrick Mahomes having a QB spy in the box. Demarcus Robinson is a good piece. He's a good pickup sometimes if Sammy Watkins is hurt. So always just keep an eye out. I'm just putting that one out there because Demarcus Robinson is in one of the most high-powered offenses in fantasy football, top 5 no matter what year it is. You could tell me they just lost a Super Bowl and they're probably on the decline. I'll tell you, you're a liar. And stop lying to me, lying person. You're a liar. Because Patrick Mahomes is still one of the best of all time. The Chiefs still have what it takes with Andy Reid at coach. They have Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Nothing's changing for them. Demarcus Robinson, a good waiver wire piece to always watch out for, but he's not the main guy. But don't sleep on him because he still had 45 catches on 59 targets. 59 targets is still a lot of targets in that Kansas City Chiefs offense. Only people that have more targets than him, like I said, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and Mecole Hardman. That's it. Then it's him. Matt Breida, just interestingly, signed a 1-year deal with the Buffalo Bills today. That helps to the Bills' argument. Maybe he could take the running back position, and that's why I'm kind of bringing him up as well. I know he didn't have a stellar year last year with Miami. He was hurt most of the time. He only rushed 59 times for 254 yards, no touchdowns. Didn't even catch a touchdown. 9 catches for 96 yards, though, on 10 yards a catch. You know he could break plays. He had one of the fastest touchdowns in 2019, running at least 22 miles per hour. He's got the wheels when he was on the Niners. The Dolphins couldn't pull out his potential. He's only played 4 years in the NFL, so this is barely going to be his 5th year. I know it's kind of old in running back years, and that's when they kind of decline on average for the average running back, not the Emmitt Smiths, the Barry Sanders, the Adrian Petersons of the world. I'm talking about the average running back. So, I mean, he's old in running back years, but he's still fairly young. He has a good chance. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary did nothing to prove that they could get the starting position last year. That's why they made Josh Allen throw 40 to 50 times a game. So, Breshad Perriman, I already spoiled what I'm going to talk about next. Matt Breida could be someone that can take that position if he can stay healthy and separate himself in the pack. I think Matt Breida can, though. Yeah, like I said, he's one of the fastest guys. That offense runs off speed. How fast can you fly down the field? That's what they like to do. They have John Brown, they added Emmanuel Sanders, and they have Gabriel Davis. All flyers. Guys they like to fly. Knox likes to fly too. They're tight end. I know they don't have John Brown anymore, but I was saying, like last year, that was their method. Throw deep. Stephon Diggs, still a deep guy. Breshad Perriman. I already talked about him just 2 seconds ago. New York Jet receiver, had 30 catches, 505 yards. He did not sign with the New York Jets. He actually signed with the Detroit Lions, a 1-year, $3 million deal. Jared Goff likes to throw the ball. The Lions are going to be down a lot against the Vikings, the Packers, maybe the Bears. So I see that Breshad Perriman's going to get some good week-to-week streaming options. If he plays maybe the Vikings one week, the Vikings secondary is awful. It was terrible. Bottom 15 in the NFL last year? Yeah, no. We like Breshad Perriman playing them twice a year. The Bears, not so much. The Packers have Kevin King, who got cooked by Scotty Miller. And Breshad Perriman has more potential than Scotty Miller. Breshad Perriman actually, he's 6'2", 215. He's a great build for a receiver. The problem is he had all the potential in the world in Baltimore, and he never lived up to the potential. No. He's only played 5 years in the NFL, but going into the 6th year, I think Breshad Perriman is getting decent. I still wouldn't draft him, but that does help, that Lions offense. If you get DeAndre Swift, at least there's someone who could fly down the field, and there's not just a bunch of nobodies at receiver, like getting like Isaiah McKenzie and stuff, which is another flyer guy that they have for the Bills. So, Breshad Perriman, keep an eye out for him to at least maybe open the field up for Hawk too. TJ Hawkinson, the tight end for the Detroit Lions. Adam Humphries, he is not re-signing with the Tennessee Titans, and he actually visited the Washington football team today. I like what the Washington football team is doing. They're adding a lot of pieces for Heineke, so no one can complain. They're adding the crafty slot guy like Adam Humphries. They already have Curtis Samuel, who's the gadget guy. They have Terry McLaurin, who's the outside guy. They have the Sims, Cam and Steve Sims Jr., who are also guys that are basically as good as Adam Humphries. So, they got everything they need. Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson, give me that Washington football offense. Give me that offense next year in fantasy football. Amir Abdullah, I know he hasn't done too much because he just had years where he was hurt. But last year he was a backup on the Vikings, only got 8 rushes for 42 yards. Year before that, 23 rushes for 115. We know that was more because Dalvin Cook was hurt. But he agreed to re-sign a 1-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings. He's already acclimated with the Vikings offense, so that wouldn't be a surprise if he were to touch the field. If Donovan, thinking about basketball, Donovan Mitchell, he's so good, by the way. Utah Jazz, he's basically D-Wade. But Amir Abdullah, if Dalvin Cook were to get hurt, the running back of the Vikings, which is not unlikely because he's gotten hurt 3 out of the last 4 years. Even last year he got hurt 2 games. Amir Abdullah would step in as a backup because Alexander Madison's not on that team anymore, and the Broncos just signed Mike Boone. So Amir Abdullah is someone who pass catches out the backfield, which is what he was known for when he was on the Detroit Lions, his best year, getting 25 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown in 2017. Not too stellar, but that Vikings offense is better. So another person you could get, say they're playing the Lions twice a year. You have Amir Abdullah on the back burner just in case Dalvin Cook goes down, who was your first-round pick. And we're going to finish off with my favorite free agent, Ryan Suckup. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers secured the bag with Ryan Suckup. He has made 83% of all of his field goals, 96% of his extra points. He is actually a bounce-back story because he was Mr. Irrelevant in 2009, which means he was the last pick in the NFL draft, and he just won the Super Bowl with the Bucs this year, having a stellar year where he hit 37 of his 40 field goal tries, 64 of his 70 extra point attempts, which are farther this year, by the way, and Suckup had a 90% regular season success rate, which is second highest in team history behind Connor Barth in 2011. Whatever. They didn't do anything. Then he went 9 for 9 in the playoffs to raise his field goal percentage to 92%. Ryan Suckup, man. Nobody likes a Suckup unless he's Ryan, which is me, by the way, your host. Ryan Suckup, and it's good that he got secured on the Bucs. I like him on the Bucs. You want field goal kickers that don't miss, that are really consistent, that play in good cities with good weather, a.k.a. Tampa Bay, Florida, unless there's a hurricane, which I hope not, which they wouldn't play anyway, so that's not even a thing. That was just me being mean. So Ryan Suckup in a good offense with a lot of touchdowns that could happen, push you in field goal range a lot of times. I'm comfortable with Ryan Suckup as my fantasy football kicker next year. Get him if you want to. He's a top 5 fantasy football kicker next year. I promise you, and I'm sure the confidence that the Bucs have in him will raise his confidence in kicking, and he will replicate what he did this year because he didn't even play the whole year. They had Matt Gay. They had a couple of other kickers too. They were trying out kickers, and Ryan Suckup won the job and took over. Ultimate Mr. Irrelevant story. When we come back, we're going to talk about the art of trade. All the stuff that goes on in Ryan's wacky mind when he wants to trade with someone and take away all their valuable assets and basically just be a pirate. Just take away all their gold and run. We'll talk about all that right after this commercial. Don't forget to stick around at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
If you are still here, thank you for sticking around at the end of the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We are here to talk about the art of the trade. I was looking at the NBA deadline that just passed, and the NBA deadline was really interesting because all these players were getting traded for mainly picks. So a lot of people are looking for the potential of the future. They traded, I don't know if you keep up with basketball, but the Bulls got Nikola Vucevic. The Miami Heat got Victor Oladipo just for a couple picks. Who else got some good picks? Someone else got another good pick. Oh, Evan Fournier and I think Mo Wagner went to the Celtics. They traded Daniel Tice. But none of them were super substantial. But the NBA trade deadline just got me thinking that sometimes, you're just like, oh, well, if you're the Miami Heat, you're like, well, I want Victor Oladipo. Actually, you don't even want him. You want Bradley Beal. I want Bradley Beal. He averages 35 points a game in the NBA. He's a shooting guard. He could play both sides of the court, and he's clutch. So why wouldn't I want him on my team? I'm going to do whatever I can to get him. Well, you can't get him because you have to give us too much. Well, then I'm going to try to give this and this. No. How about you go somewhere else with that? Well, then how about we just try to get Victor Oladipo? He's going to be a cheap bargain, and then maybe we could flip him later. So that's probably what went on with the Miami Heat because they wanted Bradley Beal, the shooting guard of the Washington Wizards at first. But when you're in that trade fever, you just want to trade. You're like, no, I want to get someone because I need my team to be better. I know it could be better, especially if you're not the best team in the NBA. You're pretty much not trading all the time. The Clippers got Rajon Rondo, ex-Laker and Celtic. Trade him from the Atlanta Hawks for Lemon Pepper Lou Williams, who went to the Atlanta Hawks. So all these guys are getting traded, and most of the time you're just getting these trades, and you're like, why are they trading for all these little guys? Because you want to make your team better by all means necessary, which is what I do. I promise you that I'm a pretty good drafter in fantasy football, but I'm a times 10 better in-season, mid-season trader because I will trade with anyone and put a balloon. I will get a nice big old garbage can. Then I'll, put a little perfume on it, put a little bow on it, dress it up, make it look very nice. Maybe I'll put a little bit of cologne too. I don't know. Cologne and perfume. Who knows how that will smell? But I will sell that garbage can to someone and they will think it's some good smelling stuff. When in the end, it's a garbage can because I try to always go up. I always try to upgrade through my trades. This year, let me tell you about how I brought an apple to a house. I basically, if you heard of the old little story that happened a couple of years that this guy had an apple and he just kept selling it for a bunch of things and bartering and trading and moved up all the way to be able to buy a house. So that's what I did with Duke Johnson. I had Duke Johnson. David Johnson just got hurt. I traded Duke Johnson to someone who I knew had David Johnson. I was like, all right, you have David Johnson. Your record's not that good. I think I'm just going to try to give him to you, but I want Mike Davis because I can't get his Chris Carson or anyone else that's more high-end. So I'm like, just give me Mike Davis. And he had Derrick Henry at the time. I'm like, give me Mike Davis. So I got Mike Davis because I sold him. I'm like, how about I give you him? And then I had a bunch of receivers. So I'm like, I'll give you Juju. And he's like, I'll give you Curtis Samuel then. So I was like, okay, screw it. Give me Curtis Samuel and Mike Davis. I'll get both of them. They did well in fantasy next year because I saw ahead and knew that Christian McCaffrey was more hurt than it seemed. So I knew Mike Davis wasn't just going to be a 1-week loan like everyone thought he was during week 7. They're like, oh no, Christian McCaffrey's coming back. I'm like, nah. I think when I researched, I think he's more hurt than people make him sound. And I think that it's going to bite people in the butt when they want to get rid of Mike Davis because Mike Davis is doing good in fantasy, averaging 15 points a game, and he still was one of the top 20 running backs last year. He was a top 10 running back for the first half of the year until he started getting 8 points 4 games in a row, which was crazy to me. But Mike Davis was still a good fantasy option. I traded for him, but I knew he wasn't going to be my RB1 I had because my best RB at the time was Chris Carson at the time, but I'll explain that later. It was Chris Carson at the time, and I was like, oh, I only have him. And Mike Davis, and that's really it. Because I didn't draft running backs because I drafted a lot of receivers. So I said, screw it, I'm going to go get, because I drafted Michael Thomas first pick. I'm like, I'm going to just try to trade Mike Davis. So I tried to trade Mike Davis. I saw that this guy who was struggling to get into the playoffs needed a for sure value, and he was a Cowboy fan. I prayed on his weakness, which is one of the things I wanted to talk about. Do it when the player is weak. This guy was just damaged because he's a Cowboys fan and he sees how the Cowboys are doing this year. This was actually before they played the Cowboys. So Antonio Gibson was going into the week where he was going to play the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, where he scored over 30 fantasy points and rushed for 3 touchdowns. Antonio Gibson's the man, but that's besides the point. I traded him while he was weak. I said, look, I'll give you Mike Davis, who's an RB1. Christian McCaffrey still hasn't came back, and he's not going to come back, including my sources. I'll give you Mike Davis straight up. You give me Antonio Gibson, because Antonio Gibson still shares with J.D. McKissic in the backfields. And not only that, but J.D. McKissic gets all the catches. So if Antonio Gibson isn't getting majority of the catches, and some weeks he's giving you 9, might as well try to get Mike Davis in that Carolina Panthers offense that likes to force it to the running back. I was telling him all this stuff. It's about to get the jab. It's about to get the jab. He had a bad week. He just lost. He's almost out of playoff contention. And what do you know? I traded Mike Davis for Antonio Gibson. So I literally traded Duke Johnson and Juju Smith for Antonio Gibson in the end. That trade is not fair at all by any means, right? Right? It's not. Anyways, let's keep on going. So that's what you do. You play on someone who's a little weak. You look at all the signs too. Make sure you look at everything that's going to happen in the future. In the beginning of the season, I saw that Justin Jefferson's a rookie and he has a lot of potential. And he was great. I honestly shouldn't have even traded him last year. He was fantastic. I had Josh Jacobs too, because I just traded Michael Thomas for Josh Jacobs. We'll talk about that later too. I traded Josh Jacobs and Justin Jefferson for DK Metcalf, Robert Tonyan, and Nick Chubb. But Nick Chubb was hurt. But I saw the signs. I saw that the Cleveland Browns were a heavy run offense team. I saw that Nick Chubb is a huge Georgia running back. When I'm saying Georgia, I just mean he's a big boned guy. He's a big, strong, tough running back. So he could bounce back from an injury faster than, say, a Tyreek Cohen, as I was stating before. But Nick Chubb was going to come back. So I traded Josh Jacobs, Justin Jefferson, and I think Mike Gesicki, because I knew that Tua was a little inconsistent. When Tua would come in, he wouldn't give it to Mike Gesicki all the time. And they gave me Robert Tonyan, Nick Chubb, and DK Metcalf. The reason why I did that also, not only the Nick Chubb part, but DK Metcalf was going to play the Jets, the Giants, and the Eagles in 3 out of his last 4 weeks. One of them was the Rams, which is the one I didn't like. But in 3 out of the last 4 weeks of fantasy, those were his matchups. I saw the schedule. I looked ahead for the signs. I was like, wow, the Giants have a terrible pass defense. The Jets have the worst pass defense in the NFL. And the Eagles have one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL as well. Their pass rush is the only thing that's good about that defense. So I saw the signs. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get DK. And then what did DK do? Do a lot of good stuff for me. At the end of the day, he was a little inconsistent, which is what I didn't care for, but I didn't need him because I already locked it up with him. So that was good, right? Yes. Then you have to get extra people, to trade later in the draft. Last year, I had Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson. I drafted Patrick Mahomes prematurely because I went against my own method for the first time ever, because I think Patrick Mahomes is the greatest football player of all time. I went against my own method and drafted him with the first pick. Just because I'm like, wow, I love this guy so much. What's the worst that could happen? That was the year where he popped his knee out, won the Super Bowl, but wasn't the best in the NFL. Only threw for 40-something touchdowns. Wasn't the 50-touchdown season he had before. Patrick Mahomes still had a great year, but it wasn't a stellar, spectacular year. But I drafted an extra quarterback in Russell Wilson in the later rounds because they let him slide. If you notice a good player is sliding, pick him up. Even if you have too much, you could trade him later down the line. I was able to trade Russell Wilson and Julio Jones, who was declining that year, who I had, for Lamar Jackson and Marlon Mack, who was having a decent year. But I was able to get MVP Lamar Jackson just because I had backup Russell Wilson. And by that point, then I was able to trade Patrick Mahomes. Keep Lamar Jackson, and flip that, and at least go to the championship. I didn't win it, but those extra people helped me do it. You always want to upgrade. Was not going to do Duke Johnson for a guy or not even Duke Johnson. I was not going to trade a Chris Carson to get, say, a Joe Mixon, or a Chris Carson to get, I'm trying to think of a running back, but I'm blanking out. Chris Carson for J.K. Dobbins. I'm not going to get someone who's decent or the same. I'm getting someone upgrade. I'm going to try to get Chris Johnson, pair him up with like Jamison Crowder, who's a consistent receiver, but you have more receivers. Why would you want Jamison Crowder? Give you Jamison Crowder, and then you have the Colts defense. I picked up an extra defense last year, so I had the Colts defense. And this brings me to what my other trade was last year, because I trade like a loon, and I won the championship, right? And don't say, oh, a bunch of people in your league are schmoes. I bet you a lot of these people in my league would do better in some of your guys' leagues. Just for the simple fact that they pay attention a lot. And you know how I know? Because I look at the waiver wire and it's always dried up by the time it gets to me. Because my team was one of the best teams. So therefore, I'm at the bottom of the waiver wire of a 12-man league. And by the time the 6 best players are taken off the waiver wire, I have nothing. So it wasn't too hot last year for me. But I traded up. So I had an extra defense, because my main defense was the Baltimore defense. I was very high on them because they have Marlon Humphreys, who was a Pro Football Focus #1 ranked cornerback. They had Earl Thomas, who didn't stick out throughout the end of the year because of reasons. They had Matt Judon, Calais Campbell, a lot of weapons on defense. Yannick Ngakoue. They had a lot of defensive weapons, and I was very, very high on them. So I drafted them in like the 11th round, because I think if you could get an elite defense sometimes, you should. Because you could wait, but if you know that the Steelers are going to pop off next year, or even the Browns, who might get Jadeveon Clowney next year, are going to pop off, get them. But I had my Ravens defense. Then I paired that along with the Colts defense. And what was the #1 defense in fantasy football? The Colts. But they're not a household name, so no one picked them up off the waiver wire by week 7. Someone dropped them because they had 2 bad weeks, and then I picked them up because they were still the #1 defense in fantasy at the end of the day. And they were doing consistent numbers. They had the most defensive touchdowns all last year. So I had them. So I knew I could bait someone like that. I was working out with my buddy, right? My buddy that's in my league. And I said, okay, hey, I like Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's really nice. You wanna give me some for Derrick Henry? He says, what do you want? I said, well, I'll give you Stephon Diggs. He's like, nah. And then we're working on more. He's like, what? You said Stephon Diggs, right? I said, yeah. I said, all right, I'm listening. I'm like, wow, really? Really? You're going to trade me Derrick Henry for Stephon Diggs? Okay. I was like, how about I throw in Chris Carson too? And the Colts defense. See? That looks like a blockbuster trade. It looks like I'm giving him a lot for nothing. That's why even in the end, he threw in Chris Godwin. He's like, I'll throw in Chris Godwin because I don't need him. I have all these receivers. And I'm like, good. That's what you want. You want Juju and guys like that. Good. As I was rubbing my hands so maniacally together, in my mind though, you don't show face. And also, make sure you have a poker face. If the trade seems too good to be true, like he was trading me Derrick Henry, the #1 offensive weapon, offensive MVP of 2020, he was going to trade him to me because Derrick Henry had one game where he had 6 points. His most recent game was 6 points, which is what I said. I prayed on the week. I wasn't going to ask him after a 40-point performance, can you trade me Derrick Henry because his stock is way too high. I said, oh, you only had a 6-point performance and seems like you lost 2 weeks in a row. Looks like you should trade me Derrick Henry. I'll give you Chris Carson, the #1 defense, which I didn't need because I just picked up the Bucs defense right after that. People don't pay attention to defenses too much in fantasy football, but the point is I had the Bucs defense, the Ravens, and the Colts. What skin is it off me if I give them the Colts defense, which I'm not going to start anyway because I like the Ravens against the Bengals in the next couple weeks and the Browns. So I said, here's the Colts defense. And he's like, okay, I'll just give you Chris Godwin and Derrick Henry. What do you think I did in that league with Derrick Henry, DK Metcalf, and who's the other guy? Antonio Gibson they gave me. Not much, because Antonio Gibson actually ended up getting hurt, so karma came back to get me, which is a main thing that I want to bring this all around. I will tell you that fantasy football gods are a thing. If you brag too much, if you talk too much smack to your friends, you are going to get the karma gods. They're going to talk trash to you, and you are going to lose or lose embarrassingly or in heartbreak fashion. So I try not to brag too much. So that's why I was like, okay, I'll wait till the season's over. Waited for the whole season, didn't talk too much mess. And then by the end of the season, talk all the trash you want. but I had all these guys, including Robert Tonyan and Logan Thomas. Okay? Logan Thomas. And then I noticed, I was like, okay, well, now that I have Derrick Henry, and then I traded, and I had Justin Jackson and Robert Tonyan. I traded both of them to get me Myles Gaskin. And I know Myles Gaskin got hurt with COVID, and he was inconsistent after his first 8 weeks, which is why Antonio Gibson and Myles Gaskin were scaring me towards the end of the year. But once it came towards the end of the year, I started Myles Gaskin. I won the fantasy championship by 5 points in a 1-week fantasy championship. I don't like doing that 2 weeks because the 2 weeks does prove who the better one is. But come on. Why do you want to just big bully at the top? You want to make it fair and fun for everyone, like an NFL Super Bowl. There's one game, one opportunity. You could stink up the bed if your team just doesn't do good or one of your best guys accidentally gets hurt. It's beautiful. It's adrenaline rushing. 1-week championships are the way to go. I played both. I played 2-week championships for most of my fantasy football career, but the 1-week championship is definitely more adrenaline rushing. I love it. So it helped me win my fantasy championship. I noticed, I traded, but as I was saying, I traded Justin Jackson at Robert Tonyan, and I got Myles Gaskin. I won by 5 points, and guess what Myles Gaskin scored in the fantasy championship game? Derrick Henry didn't even score that much in the fantasy championship game. He just got me there because in the playoffs, he scored back-to-back 30-point performances. So I wasn't going to lose on top of DK, Justin Herbert, Antonio Gibson, and then my other boy that I'll explain right now. But yes, I got them all. So I had all my running backs. So I'm like, Nick Chubb's hurt. Why do I need Nick Chubb? I have Myles Gaskin, Derrick Henry, Antonio Gibson. Let's trade Nick Chubb. I traded Nick Chubb, and guess who I got for Nick Chubb? To a guy who had Kareem Hunt. I knew he needed Kareem Hunt, and it actually wasn't good because in the end, I actually played against Nick Chubb in the championship. I traded him Nick Chubb for Allen Robinson, yes, the guy who had 102 catches and over 1,000 receiving yards last year. The guy who helped me win my fantasy championship along with Deontay Johnson. Who I also got in that Derrick Henry trade. He gave me Derrick Henry, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson. So I had Allen Robinson, Deontay Johnson, DK Metcalf, all off trades, Logan Thomas off the waiver wire because I pay attention a lot, along with Derrick Henry, Myles Gaskin, Antonio Gibson, and Justin Herbert I got off the waiver wire. All trades and waiver wire right there. You can't tell me that's a beautifully put together team. The only thing I kept on my team, I think, was my kicker, who was Ryan Suckup, and then the Baltimore Ravens defense. That's it. That was it. And that is the art of the trade. You always have to make sure you're upgrading. You try to look ahead of player schedules to see what they're dealing with, and if they have easier schedules ahead, you want to get those players and trade the people who have tougher schedules. Don't trade with people who are playoff bound because you don't want them to get the better players. I accidentally traded the championship guy to Nick Chubb, but overall I prevailed in the end and I won. Allen Robinson actually outscored Nick Chubb by guess how much? 5 fantasy points, and that's how much I won by. You cannot write that Cinderella story better. You got to do it when the other opposing player is weak, not in a mean way, but if their team lost, maybe their real-life professional team lost, maybe one of their players got hurt, you say, hey, I got something that seems like it could be of equal value when you know that their stock is on the decline. It's all a mental game. Always upgrade. Remember that. It's always a mental game. Here at the Fantasy GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, we are here to make you a champion. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And always make sure that you check into this show because this show will make you a champion at the end of the day. I am so happy to be your host. I am Ryan Basulto. Thank you and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.